For centuries, the Janissaries stood at the heart of the Ottoman Empire's military power. Formed as a disciplined, salaried infantry loyal only to the Sultan, they helped transform a frontier state into a world empire. Their early victories reshaped the balance of power across Anatolia, the Balkans, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Yet by the late 17th and 18th centuries, the very institution that once guaranteed Ottoman supremacy had become a source of instability, corruption, and resistance to change. The decline of the Janissaries offers a powerful lesson in how rigid institutions, when detached from reform and accountability, can undermine even the strongest empires. The Janissary Corps was originally designed to be different from all other military units of its time. Recruited through the Janissaries system, Christian boys were taken from provincial families, converted to Islam, and trained rigorously for state service. Cut off from family ties and private economic interests, these soldiers were meant to embody discipline, loyalty, and professionalism. They were forbidden from marrying, owning property, or engaging in trade. Their lives revolved around the barracks, the battlefield, and absolute obedience to the Sultan. This system worked remarkably well in the empire's early centuries. Janissaries played a decisive role in major victories, including the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. Armed with early firearms and trained in coordinated infantry tactics, they gave the Ottomans a technological and organizational edge over their rivals. Their reputation for discipline and effectiveness spread fear across Europe and admiration within the Islamic world. However, success planted the seeds of decline. As the empire expanded and stabilized, the strict rules governing the Janissaries slowly eroded. By the late 16th century, the Janissaries system weakened and recruitment standards loosened. Sons of Janissaries were increasingly allowed to inherit their fathers' positions, turning what had once been a merit-based institution into a hereditary class. This change fundamentally altered the character of the corps. Marriage bans were lifted, and Janissaries began settling into civilian life. Many took up trades, opened shops, and joined urban guilds, especially in Istanbul. While this integration into society increased their political influence, it reduced their military readiness. Soldiers who once trained constantly now divided their time between commerce and service. Discipline declined, and absenteeism became common. At the same time, Janissary numbers swelled far beyond military needs. Enrollment became a way to gain a salary, tax privileges, and social status rather than to serve on the battlefield. Corruption flourished as officials sold positions, inflated payrolls, and registered ghost soldiers, who existed only on paper. The treasury strained under the burden of paying thousands of ineffective troops, weakening the state's financial stability. As European armies underwent rapid transformation during the early modern period, the Janissaries resisted change. While Western powers adopted new drilling methods, advanced artillery, and modern command structures, the Janissaries clung to outdated tactics. Any attempt at reform was perceived as a threat to their privileges. Firearms training stagnated, battlefield discipline weakened, and the corps fell behind technologically. Their resistance was not passive. The Janissaries increasingly interfered in politics, using their collective power to intimidate sultans and officials. They staged riots in the capital, deposed grand viziers, and even played a role in the overthrow and execution of sultans. Rather than serving the state, they began to hold the state hostage. Several sultans recognized the danger. Reform-minded rulers attempted to modernize the army along European lines, creating new units, trained and equipped according to contemporary standards. These efforts repeatedly met fierce opposition. Janissaries saw reform as the first step toward their dissolution and responded with open rebellion. Barracks revolts became a recurring feature of Ottoman political life, paralyzing governance and discouraging long-term planning. The consequences were evident on the battlefield. Ottoman defeats against Austria, Russia, and other European powers revealed deep structural weaknesses. Campaigns were marked by poor coordination, lack of discipline, and unwillingness to adapt. While European armies emphasized centralized command and professional officer corps, the Janissaries relied on tradition and political leverage rather than performance. Internally, their influence distorted urban life. In cities like Istanbul, Janissaries dominated markets and guilds, using their status to gain economic advantages. They collected illegal fees, intimidated rivals, and resisted taxation. This behavior eroded public trust and blurred the line between soldier and civilian enforcer. What had once been a pillar of order increasingly contributed to lawlessness. The Janissary problem also reflected a deeper issue within the empire: the difficulty of reforming entrenched institutions. The Ottoman system had been extraordinarily flexible in its early centuries, absorbing new technologies and administrative practices. But over time, powerful groups like the Janissaries became guardians of the status quo. Reform threatened not only their livelihoods, but their identity and social position. By the early 19th century, the crisis reached a breaking point. Sultan Mahmud II concluded that meaningful reform was impossible as long as the Janissaries existed. In 1826, after careful preparation, he moved decisively. When the Janissaries revolted once again against modernization efforts, the state responded with overwhelming force. Barracks were shelled, thousands were killed or exiled, and the corps was officially abolished in an event later known as the Auspicious Incident. The destruction of the Janissaries marked the end of an era. It removed a major obstacle to military reform and allowed the empire to begin building a modern army. However, the damage had already been done. Decades of stagnation, corruption, and political interference had weakened the Ottoman state at a critical moment in global history. Reform could no longer fully compensate for lost time. The story of Janissary decline is not merely a tale of military failure. It illustrates how institutions designed for one historical context can become dangerous when they outlive their purpose. Privilege without accountability, tradition without adaptation, and power without responsibility proved fatal to an elite force that once symbolized Ottoman strength. In the end, the Janissaries fell not because they were defeated by foreign enemies alone, but because they resisted the very changes needed to survive in a transforming world. Their rise and fall remain a cautionary example of how internal corruption and resistance to reform can undermine even the mightiest empires from within.